I spent 3 weeks orchestrating the perfect dinner at the Sterling Club to celebrate my husband's multi-million-dollar merger. Instead of business partners, I found him on one knee, offering my grandmother's heirloom ring to the foster sister I had sheltered for 5 years. Standing in the shadows, I realized they were not just stealing my marriage but plotting to seize my inheritance and lock me away in a mental institution within 30 days. My name is Scarlett, and at 32 years old, I had cultivated a life that looked flawless from the outside. As the sole heiress to one of the largest real estate empires in Boston, I could have easily spent my days attending galas and shopping, but I chose to build my own interior design firm from the ground up. I prided myself on my sharp eye for detail, a trait that allowed me to spot a counterfeit antique or a structural flaw from across a room. Yet, as I adjusted the silk lapels of my coat in the elevator of the Sterling Club, I remained blissfully blind to the structural rot in my own marriage. I was there to celebrate Julian, my brilliant husband whose tech startup had just secured a merger worth millions. To everyone else, we were the power couple of the decade. And then there was Ivy, my foster sister, the fragile bird I had taken under my wing 5 years ago. Ivy, who always needed protecting. Ivy, who looked at the world with wide, innocent doe eyes. I arrived 40 minutes early, clutching a velvet box containing a Patek Philippe watch I had spent months sourcing. It was engraved with the date of our first meeting. I wanted to ensure the vintage Cabernet Sauvignon was breathing properly before the investors arrived. The hallway to the VIP suite was quiet, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my heels. As I reached for the handle of the double mahogany doors, I stopped. The door was slightly ajar. A scent hit me instantly. Roses, hundreds of them. My throat tightened instinctively. Julian knew I was severely allergic to roses, but Ivy adored them. A cold knot formed in my stomach, heavier than the platinum watch in my hand. I pushed the door open just an inch, peering into the dim, candlelit room. There were no business partners. There were no investors. Julian was there, but he was not checking his phone or pacing nervously as he usually did before big meetings. He was on one knee. My breath hitched. In his hand sat a ring box, and inside it glittered a massive blue diamond. The breath left my lungs in a painful rush. That was my grandmother's heirloom ring, the one I had told Julian was missing 2 months ago after I could not find it in the safe. He had held me while I cried over its loss, whispering that we would turn the house upside down to find it. He was holding it out to Ivy. "I cannot wait until we stop hiding," Julian said, his voice dripping with a tenderness he had stopped showing me years ago. "Just 1 more month. Baby, once I take control of her trust fund, we are free." Ivy giggled, twirling a lock of hair around her finger. She did not look like the fragile girl I protected anymore. She looked predatory. "Are you sure the lawyers have everything ready?" Ivy asked, her voice light and mocking. "I do not want to deal with her screaming when you kick her out." "It is handled," Julian assured her, sliding my grandmother's ring onto her finger. "The paperwork for her commitment is already drafted. The doctors agree that her behavior has been erratic. A tragic mental breakdown after the stress of the merger. She will be in the sanitarium, and we will be in Paris." "She is so stupid," Ivy sneered, admiring the blue diamond on her hand. "I cannot believe she actually thinks I look up to her. If she knew we have been doing this for 2 years right under her nose. 2 years. The world tilted on its axis. My vision blurred, but I did not charge in. I did not scream. The Scarlett who would have fought for her family died in that hallway. Instead, my hand moved to my pocket. My fingers trembled violently as I pulled out my phone, but I forced them to still. I lifted the camera to the crack in the door and pressed record. "I love you so much," Julian whispered to her. "This is our time now." "Finally," Ivy sighed, leaning down to kiss my husband. I captured every second of it. The ring, the kiss, the confession of their conspiracy. When I ended the recording, I felt a terrifying calm wash over me. It was cold and absolute. I stepped back from the door, my movements silent. I walked to the trash can near the elevator and dropped the $60,000 watch into the bin without a second glance. I took the service elevator down and walked out into the freezing Boston rain. The water soaked through my coat, but I could not feel the cold. I got into my car, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. As I drove away from the life I thought I had, I dialed a number I had not used in a decade. "It is Scarlett," I said when the line connected, my voice devoid of emotion. "I need you. I want to audit my entire life." The drive back to our sprawling estate felt like a funeral procession for the life I thought I was living. When I walked through the double doors of the mansion, the silence that usually brought me peace now felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath to keep Julian's secrets. Every piece of furniture I had carefully selected, every painting we had bought together in Europe, now looked like a prop in a twisted stage play where I was the only actor who did not know the script. Julian arrived home an hour later, smelling of rain and that distinct, cloying scent of deception. He walked into the living room with a practiced sigh, loosening his tie as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders rather than the weight of his betrayal. "I am so sorry, darling," Julian said, offering me a small bouquet of wilting carnations clearly purchased from a 24-hour gas station. The partners canceled at the last minute. Something about a flight delay from Tokyo. I tried to call, but my battery died. I looked at the cheap flowers, wrapped in crinkly plastic, and compared them in my mind to the hundreds of lush, velvet roses filling the room at the Sterling Club for Ivy. The disparity was so sharp it almost made me laugh. "It is okay, Julian," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady and soft. "I was worried, but I am just glad you are home safe. You must be exhausted." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that used to make me feel cherished but now made my skin crawl. I think I will turn in early." I played the role of the understanding wife perfectly. I made him tea. I dimmed the lights. But the moment his breathing deepened into sleep, I slipped out of bed. I did not go to the kitchen. Instead, I went to the library where Julian kept his old electronics. He was meticulous about his phone, but he was careless with his digital footprint on devices he deemed obsolete. I found his old iPad tucked between two books on the bottom shelf. It still had a 12% charge. My hands did not shake this time. I felt a cold, surgical precision taking over. He had forgotten to log out of the cloud. I scrolled past the mundane until I found a hidden folder named New Horizon. I tapped it open. Hundreds of photos flooded the screen. Julian and Ivy in the Maldives when he was supposed to be at a tech conference in Silicon Valley. Julian and Ivy in Paris during the week I was home with the flu. They were smiling, looking at each other with a raw intimacy he had never shown me. But the photos were just the insult. The emails were the injury. I found a thread with a lawyer named Silas regarding my mental state. "We need to establish a pattern of instability," Julian had written. "She has never recovered from the miscarriage 3 years ago. We can use that. Claim she is having hallucinations and severe mood swings associated with post-traumatic stress." I froze. The miscarriage. Losing our child had been the darkest period of my life, a grief that nearly broke me. To see him weaponize my trauma, to use the death of our unborn baby as a tool to lock me away, shattered whatever lingering love I had for him. Then I saw a forwarded text from Ivy attached to the email chain. She could not even keep a baby alive. Julian. How does she expect to keep a man? She is defective. We are doing her a favor by taking over. Bile rose in my throat. I had to close my eyes and breathe through my nose to keep from screaming. Defective. That word burned itself into my brain, fueling a fire that would consume them both. The next morning, I arrived at my design firm with dry eyes and a spine of steel. I called my chief accountant into my office. "I want to do a surprise review of the accounts," I stated, keeping my tone casual. Specifically, the external vendor contracts Julian recommended last year. We spent 4 hours combing through the ledgers. It did not take long to find the anomaly. There was a recurring monthly payment flowing into a company called Ivy League Consulting. The arrogance of the name was staggering. "What is this firm providing for us?" I asked the accountant, pointing to the screen. "Mr. Montgomery said they handle specialized software upgrades and high-level strategic consulting," the accountant replied nervously. He signed off on the invoices personally as the guarantor. I pulled the transaction history. Over the last 18 months, they had siphoned exactly $2 million out of my company. $2 million of my hard-earned money used to fund their affair, their trips, and likely the very lawyer they were paying to declare me insane. I sat back in my chair, the numbers glowing on the screen. My first instinct was to call my lawyer and file for divorce immediately, to throw these papers in his face. But then logic kicked in, cold and hard. We had drafted an amendment to our prenuptial agreement 5 years ago, but due to the trust I had in him, I had delayed signing the final clause that protected my inheritance from his debts and business entanglements. If I filed for divorce today, under the current terms, Julian could claim 50% of everything I owned, including the company I built. He would walk away with half my fortune and run straight to Ivy. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "That is not going to happen." I needed time. I needed to get him to sign away his rights before he knew I was on to him. I had to play the long game. I had to let them believe they were winning until the very moment I crushed them. I met my private investigator, Miller, at a grimy diner on the outskirts of the city, a place where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber and no one asked questions. I wore a baseball cap and oversized sunglasses, looking over my shoulder before sliding into the booth. Miller did not waste time with pleasantries. He slid a thick manila envelope across the scratched laminate table. "Your innocent little sister has quite the resume." Miller grunted, tapping the file with a nicotine-stained finger. Ivy was not just a poor orphan down on her luck. She was expelled from her university 2 months before graduation for check fraud and identity theft. She has been running cons since she was 18. I flipped through the documents, my blood running cold. Mugshots, expulsion letters, witness statements. I had welcomed a viper into my home, fed it, and clothed it, thinking I was saving a dove. Back at the mansion, the psychological warfare began. Julian started moving my things. My car keys, which I always placed in the crystal bowl by the door, would appear in the refrigerator. Important contracts I left on my desk would vanish, only to be found in the trash can in the guest bathroom. "Scarlett, are you feeling all right?" Julian asked one evening, holding up my keys with a look of practiced concern. "I found these in the pantry. You are becoming so forgetful lately. It worries me." I forced a tremble into my hands, widening my eyes in feigned panic. I do not know what is happening to me. Julian, I could have sworn I left them on the table." He hugged me, burying his face in my hair, but his embrace felt like a cage. "Shh, it is okay. We will get you help." While he played his games, I played mine. I spent the next day installing micro cameras and listening devices in his home office and under the dashboard of his Tesla. The technology was expensive and illegal, but I was past caring about the law. I needed ammunition. The first recording came through 2 days later. I sat in my car, headphones on, listening to Julian speak to Dr. Eris, our family physician. "The dosage needs to be higher." Julian's voice crackled through the audio feed. "She is still too lucid. I need her confused. I need her to look unstable at the gala next month. I can prescribe a stronger sedative." "Dr. Eris replied, his voice smooth and oily. "But if she takes too much, it could cause permanent neurological damage. Just do it, Julian snapped. I pay you to write prescriptions, not to have a conscience. That night, Julian handed me 2 blue pills with a glass of water, his eyes full of fake sympathy. Doctor, Eris sent these over. They will help you sleep. I took them gratefully, and the moment he turned his back to hang up his jacket, I palmed the pills and swapped them for the vitamin supplements I had shaped to look identical. I swallowed the vitamins and spent the rest of the evening dragging my feet and slurring my words, watching a satisfied smirk tug at the corner of his mouth. The betrayal deepened when Ivy came to visit the next afternoon. She walked in carrying a thermos, playing the role of the doting sister. I made you some bird's nest soup, she cooed, pouring a steaming bowl. It is good for the nerves. You look so pale. Poor thing. I thanked her, tears of fake gratitude welling in my eyes. You are so good to me. Ivy, I do not deserve you. I took the bowl upstairs, claiming I wanted to rest while I ate. Once the door was locked, I poured the soup into a plastic bag, saving a small vial for testing, and flushed the rest down the toilet. I sent the sample to an independent lab immediately. The results came back via encrypted email 24 hours later. The soup was laced with a potent hallucinogen, a drug designed to induce paranoia and hysterical outbursts. They were not just trying to drug me, they were trying to script a public breakdown. Armed with this evidence, I walked into the office of Victoria Sterling. She was the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston, a woman known for stripping unfaithful husbands down to their socks. I laid the photos, the financial records, and the lab results on her glass desk. Victoria read through them in silence, her expression unreadable until she reached the end. She looked up, a sharp, predatory smile cutting across her face. We could go to the police now, Victoria said, leaning back in her leather chair. But where is the fun in that? If you want to destroy them, Scarlett, you need to do it publicly. You need to strip them of their reputation before you strip them of their freedom. What do you suggest I asked? The trap is already set, Victoria said, tapping her pen on the desk. Julian wants to announce his takeover at your 5th wedding anniversary party. Right, let him. We will turn that celebration into his execution. Julian, I said over breakfast, my voice soft and airy as I buttered a piece of toast. I have been thinking. For our 5th anniversary, we should go back to where it all started. The Grand Duke Hotel. We should have a massive celebration. Julian looked up from his tablet, exchanging a quick, guarded glance with the empty chair where Ivy usually sat when she visited. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. A public venue. Hundreds of guests. The perfect stage for my final act of madness. That sounds ambitious, darling, he said, masking his excitement with concern. Are you sure you are up for it with your recent spells I want to try? I pleaded, widening my eyes. For us. Of course. He smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Whatever makes you happy. The trap was set. They thought they were leading the lamb to slaughter, not realizing the lamb had grown fangs. 2 days later, I took Ivy shopping. We went to the most exclusive boutique on Newbury Street. I picked out a gown for her, a striking, serpentine shade of emerald green. In my family's old superstitions, green was the color of envy and betrayal, a symbol for the snake in the grass. Oh, I do not know. Scarlett, Ivy said, frowning at her reflection in the mirror. Is it not a bit bold nonsense? I insisted, adjusting the straps on her shoulders. It brings out your eyes. Besides, you should shine too. It is a big night for the family. While the seamstress pinned the hem, I leaned in close, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Honestly, Ivy, I am just relieved. I have decided to announce it at the party. I am stepping down. I am signing full control of the company over to Julian that night. I cannot handle the pressure anymore. Ivy's eyes lit up with a hunger she could not hide. Really? You are going to give him everything, Everything. I sighed. I just want to rest. The moment I went to the changing room, I watched through the gap in the curtain. Ivy was frantically typing on her phone. The bait had been taken. I spent the next 48 hours moving in silence. I met with my bankers in a secure, private vault, far away from Julian's prying eyes. I froze our joint accounts, citing suspicious activity, and moved my personal inheritance, the vast majority of our wealth, into an irrevocable trust that not even a court order could easily pierce. By the time Julian came home that evening, he was practically vibrating with adrenaline. He carried a stack of documents, his hands trembling slightly. "Just some routine insurance updates." "Darling," he said, placing the thick pile of papers on the coffee table, "and a few things for the estate planning. Since you mentioned stepping back, I thought we should get the boring paperwork out of the way before the party." I was sitting on the sofa, feigning the lethargy of a woman heavily sedated. "Oh, of course, Julian, whatever you say." He handed me a pen. I looked at it, then clumsily dropped it, letting it roll under the couch. "Oh, clumsy me," I slurred. "Do you have another here?" he said impatiently, reaching into his pocket. "No, wait, I have one," I said, pulling a sleek black pen from my pocket. It was a specialized ink pen I had ordered from an espionage supply catalog. The ink was vibrant and dark, but it was chemically unstable. It would vanish completely within 24 hours of contact with paper. I signed page after page without reading them. Power of attorney, transfer of assets, total control of the company. I signed my life away with a shaky hand and a disappearing signature. "Done," I whispered, dropping the pen. "I am so tired." "Julian, you did great, baby," he said, snatching the papers up with a speed that betrayed his greed. "Go to sleep. I will handle everything." I climbed the stairs, but I did not sleep. I sat in the dark of my bedroom, headphones on, listening to the bug I had planted in his office. She signed it. Julian's voice boomed through the receiver. "The stupid cow signed everything. It is done, Ivy. The company is mine. The money is mine." Did she suspect anything? Ivy's voice chirped back. "Nothing." She was barely awake. Julian laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "The milk cow has finally been milked dry." I sat in the shadows, staring at the rain lashing against the window. A cold smile touched my lips, sharp as a blade. "Enjoy it while it lasts," I whispered to the empty room, "because tomorrow the ink fades." 3 days before the party, I invited Julian's parents to dinner. The Montgomerys were old Boston money, the kind of people who believed that reputation was the only currency that mattered and that a scandal was worse than a death in the family. I set the table with the finest china, the silver polished to a mirror shine, playing the part of the perfect, dutiful daughter-in-law one last time. As we sat over the roast lamb, I raised my glass of sparkling water, catching Julian's eye. "I just want to say how lucky I am," I said, my voice dripping with sugary sincerity. "In this modern world, where men stray so easily, Julian has remained a pillar of loyalty. It is rare to find a man who honors his vows with such devotion." Julian choked on his wine. He coughed violently, his face turning a blotchy red as his mother patted his back. "Careful, son." His father grunted, looking at him with stern approval. "Scarlett is right. A Montgomery never breaks his word." "Integrity is everything." "Integrity," Julian wheezed, wiping his mouth with a napkin to hide his trembling hands. "Yes, of course." The irony was delicious, but the night held a darker revelation. After dinner, while the housekeeper cleared the table, I went into the downstairs guest powder room, the one Ivy used exclusively when she visited earlier that day. In the trash bin, wrapped carelessly in tissue, I found a plastic stick with 2 distinct pink lines, a pregnancy test. I stood there, staring at the positive result, and the final piece of their twisted puzzle fell into place. Ivy was pregnant, That was the rush. That was why they needed me declared incompetent within the month. If I was out of the picture, locked away in an institution, Julian could eventually annul our marriage or claim guardianship, and their bastard child would become the heir to my empire. They were not just stealing my money, they were replacing my entire existence. I tossed the stick back into the trash. They wanted a legacy, I would give them one. I retreated to my private study and locked the door. On my computer screen, the presentation for the gala was open. I began the editing process with the precision of a surgeon. I took the sentimental photos of our wedding, our vacations, the smiling faces of our past, and I spliced them with the footage from the Sterling Club. The first slide showed our first dance, sweet and innocent. Then, the image shifted to Julian on his knee, proposing to Ivy. Next came a photo of us cutting the wedding cake, immediately followed by the clip of Ivy laughing about how stupid I was, to ensure there were no technical glitches to save them. I hired a freelance cybersecurity specialist I knew from my days managing corporate security contracts. He hacked into the hotel's audio-visual system remotely. Once I gave the signal, the video would play on a loop, and no one, not the staff, not the manager, and certainly not Julian, would be able to cut the power without shutting down the entire building. Next, I turned my attention to the guest list. Julian had invited the heavy hitters, the male CEOs and investors he wanted to impress. I made a few additions. I sent personal, handwritten invitations to their wives. These were women who lunched together, who judged silently, and who viewed the mistress as the ultimate enemy. I wanted a jury of peers who would show no mercy. By the afternoon before the party, the adrenaline had given me a glow that I could not hide. Julian noticed it as I arranged flowers in the hallway. "You seem better," he said, eyeing me with suspicion. "More energetic." I paused, cutting a stem with a sharp snap. "I suppose I am just excited." "Julian, it feels like a new beginning." Later, I heard him whispering to Ivy on the phone in the garage. "She is acting strange," he hissed. "She is too happy. It is terminal lucidity." "You idiot!" Ivy's voice crackled through the speaker I had tapped. "It happens before the brain completely snaps. It means the drugs are working. She will be a raving lunatic by tomorrow night. Just stick to the plan." I smiled. Stick to the plan. I logged into my banking app for the final stroke of genius. The $2 million that Julian had embezzled into the shell company, I moved every cent of it. I transferred the entire sum into a new account I had set up using Ivy's personal details, a charity account that was not registered as a non-profit, by moving the stolen funds directly to her. I had just framed Ivy for embezzlement and massive tax fraud. She was no longer just a mistress. On paper, she was now the mastermind behind the theft. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt like an ocean. Julian was already dreaming of his millions. I turned to him, my voice soft in the darkness. "Julian?" He grunted, half asleep. "Tomorrow will be the most memorable day of your life." He chuckled, thinking I was doting on him. "I know it will. Babe, go to sleep." I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I counted down the hours until the sunrise. The stage was set, the players were in place, and I was ready to burn the theater down. The Grand Duke Hotel ballroom was a cavern of crystal chandeliers and gold leaf, filled to capacity with 200 of the most influential people in Boston. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of gossip. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering champagne to investors who held the fate of my company in their manicured hands. Julian had been explicit in his instructions that morning. He wanted me to wear white. He wanted me to look pale, ethereal, and fragile, a delicate flower wilting under the pressure of her own mind. I stepped into the light at the top of the grand staircase wearing blood-red silk. The dress was a custom creation, structured and sharp, hugging every curve before cascading down to the floor like a pool of liquid ruby. It was not the dress of a victim. It was the dress of a warrior queen. As I descended the stairs, heads turned. The murmurs stopped. I saw Julian near the bar, and his jaw practically unhinged. He rushed over to meet me, his smile tight and strained. "Scarlett," he hissed through his teeth, gripping my elbow a little too hard. "I thought we agreed on the white chiffon. You look aggressive." "White washes me out." "Darling," I replied, my voice smooth and loud enough for the nearby senator's wife to hear. "Besides, tonight is a celebration. Red is for passion. Is it not?" Before he could argue, Ivy appeared at his other side. She was wearing the emerald green gown I had chosen for her, looking every bit the envious snake she was. She reached for Julian's arm, her fingers digging into his tuxedo jacket, trying to stake her claim. "You look lovely." "Ivy," I said, intercepting her hand before she could secure her grip on my husband. I steered her forcefully toward a group of elderly board members. "Mr. Henderson, have you met my foster sister? She is fascinated by estate law. You simply must tell her about your latest case." I left her trapped in a circle of octogenarians, her eyes darting toward Julian in panic. But I was already moving away. The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Julian took the stage, the spotlight catching the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He adjusted the microphone, composing his features into a mask of solemn devotion. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Tonight marks 5 years of marriage to my beautiful wife, Scarlett. It has been a journey of joy, but also profound challenge. As many of you know, Scarlett has been battling significant health issues lately. Her strength inspires me, even as her fragility breaks my heart. Tonight is about securing her legacy and ensuring she is protected." A ripple of sympathetic sighs went through the room. I stood near the front, a glass of champagne in my hand. I raised it to my lips but did not drink. I simply smiled. A cold, Mona Lisa smile that did not reach my eyes. Across the room, Ivy had escaped the board members. She stood in the shadows, her hand resting protectively on her lower stomach. She caught my eye and smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the baby in her womb was her golden ticket to my fortune. "And now," Julian announced, extending a hand toward me, "I would like to invite my wife to the stage to officially sign the transition of leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Scarlett." The room applauded politely, expecting a scene. They expected me to stumble. They expected me to slur my words or burst into tears. I walked up the stairs with the grace of a panther. My steps were steady, my chin held high. I took the microphone from Julian's hand, my grip firm. Up close, I saw the confusion flicker in his eyes. He was looking for the dilation of my pupils, the slackness in my jaw from the sedatives he thought I had taken. He found only ice. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice clear and commanding, ringing out through the silent hall. "You have always been so thoughtful about my future." I turned to the crowd, making eye contact with the wives I had personally invited. They were watching intently. "My husband believes that tonight is about the end of an era," I continued, pacing slowly across the stage. "He believes I am ready to give up everything I have built. And he is right. I am ready to let go of the things that no longer serve me." Julian stepped forward, reaching for the papers on the podium. "Here is the pen, darling. Let us just get the signature done so you can rest." I placed my hand over the papers, stopping him. "In a moment," I said, pulling my hand back. "But before I sign anything, before I hand over my life's work, I think it is important for everyone here to understand exactly what the last 5 years have meant. I want you all to see the truth of our marriage." I turned to the tech booth in the back of the room and raised my hand. Roll the footage. The massive projection screen behind us began to lower with a mechanical hum. The house lights cut out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static tension like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Julian froze, his silhouette rigid against the descending screen. He did not know it yet, but he was already dead. The video began with a soft, orchestral swell of violins. On the massive screen behind me, a montage of our wedding day played in high definition. There was Julian, looking dapper in his tuxedo, lifting my veil. There was me, laughing as we cut the cake. The audience let out a collective, "Aw!" and I saw the tension leave Julian's shoulders. He flashed a smug, relieved grin at the front row, thinking I had capitulated, thinking the sedative had done its job and I was just a sentimental fool saying goodbye. Then, the music distorted. A harsh, electronic screech tore through the speakers, causing several guests to cover their ears. The beautiful wedding imagery fractured, pixelated, and then cut to black. A second later, the screen flickered back to life, but the lighting was different. It was dim, intimate, and grainy. It was the VIP room at the Sterling Club. The ballroom went deathly silent. On the screen, magnified to 20 feet high, Julian was on one knee. He was holding the blue diamond ring, my grandmother's ring, and looking up at Ivy with a reverence he had never shown me. "I cannot wait until we stop hiding!" Julian's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, crisp and undeniable. "Just one more month, baby! Once I take control of her trust fund, we are free!" A gasp rippled through the crowd, starting as a low murmur and rising to a roar of shock. "She will be in the sanitarium, and we will be in Paris," the on-screen Julian continued. Ivy's giggle followed, shrill and mocking. "She is so stupid. I cannot believe she actually thinks I look up to her." Realization hit the real Julian like a physical blow. His face drained of all color, leaving him looking like a corpse. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged toward the technical booth at the back of the room. "Cut the feed. It is a glitch. Turn it off." He tried to scramble over the velvet rope, but two massive security guards stepped into his path. I had hired them from a private firm, and they did not care about his title or his money. They crossed their arms, forming a wall of muscle that he bounced off of uselessly. "Let me through!" Julian shrieked, looking back at the screen in horror. The video ended, but the show was far from over. The screen shifted to a slideshow presentation, professional and stark. "This," I said, my voice calm and amplified by the microphone, cutting through his panic, "is a bank statement from our joint account dated last month." A massive spreadsheet appeared, highlighting a series of transfers. "And this," I continued, clicking the remote, "is a series of hotel receipts for the Four Seasons in the Maldives for a trip my husband claimed was a business conference in Seattle. You will notice the second guest listed is not a business partner, but Ms. Ivy Thorne." The next slide was a high-resolution photo of the pregnancy test I had found in the trash. "And finally," I said, my tone as dry as if I were discussing quarterly earnings, "congratulations are in order. My foster sister is pregnant with my husband's child." A heavy thud echoed from the front row. Julian's mother had collapsed. She lay on the carpet, her pearls scattered, having fainted from the sheer, crushing weight of the humiliation. His father stood over her, frozen, his face a mask of gray ash as he stared at his son with eyes full of revulsion. Ivy, realizing the game was up, gathered her emerald skirt and tried to bolt toward the side exit. "Oh no, you don't!" A voice rang out. Mrs. Vanderbilt, the wife of Julian's biggest potential investor, stepped directly into Ivy's path. She was joined by 3 other formidable women I had invited. They formed a phalanx of diamonds and disdain, blocking the door. They did not touch Ivy. They simply looked at her with such withering scorn that she shrank back, trapped like a rat. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Julian, who was now trembling, his hands pulling at his hair. "Let us talk numbers," I said, gesturing to the screen where a final figure was displayed in bold red. "This is the sum of $2 million. This is the amount of money my husband embezzled from my company to fund a shell corporation under Ivy's name. He stole from me to pay for the woman he was cheating on me with." "She is lying," Julian bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at me. He looked wild, sweat pouring down his face. "She is sick. Look at her. This is a deep fake. It is AI. She made it all up because she is paranoid. She is having a psychotic break." He looked around the room, pleading with the guests. "Do not believe her. She is crazy. Is that your defense?" "Julian," I asked softly. "That I am insane." From the shadows of the stage wings, Victoria stepped out. My lawyer looked terrifyingly beautiful, holding a thick stack of documents and a fresh court summons. "If the video is fake." "Julian," I said. "Then explain this." I pressed the final button on my remote. The screen went black, leaving only audio. The room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. "The dosage needs to be higher." Julian's voice snarled through the speakers, devoid of any love or humanity. "She is still too lucid. I need her. Confused. I need her to look unstable at the gala next month. I can prescribe a stronger sedative." "Dr. Eris's voice replied, "But if she takes too much, it could cause permanent neurological damage." "Just do it," Julian snapped on the recording. "I pay you to write prescriptions, not to have a conscience." The horror in the room was palpable. It was a physical weight. The guests did not just look shocked. They looked terrified. This was not just adultery. This was a conspiracy to cause bodily harm. This was evil. I lowered the microphone, watching Julian crumble as the truth buried him alive. "I think," I said to the stunned crowd, "that concludes my presentation." The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, but it was not a late guest. It was the Boston Police Department, flanked by a tactical team I had alerted an hour prior. They marched into the room with the grim determination of reapers coming for a harvest. Julian looked from the officers to me, his eyes darting wildly like a trapped animal. He realized in that split second that there was no way out, no spin doctor who could fix this, and no amount of money that could silence the truth. So, he did what cowards always do. He turned on the person closest to him. "Officers." Julian screamed, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender as he backed away from Ivy. "Thank God you are here. You have to arrest her. She orchestrated everything I was a victim. She seduced me. She forced me to sign those checks." Ivy froze. The color drained from her face, replaced instantly by a flush of pure, molten rage. She looked at the man she had betrayed me for, the man she was carrying a child for, and saw him throwing her to the wolves without a second thought. "You lying bastard," Ivy shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "It was your idea. You said you hated her. You said you wanted her money. She did not run from the police." Instead, she lunged at Julian. She tackled him, her manicured nails raking across his face, leaving angry red welts. It was a spectacle of absolute degradation. Two people who thought they were royalty were now rolling on the floor in their expensive evening wear, screaming accusations at each other while the creme de la creme of Boston society watched in horrified silence. I stood on the stage, looking down at them like a director surveying a particularly chaotic scene. I lifted the microphone to my lips one last time. "The play is over," I said, my voice echoing coldly through the hall. "And I must say, you two are excellent actors." The police pulled them apart. It took 3 officers to restrain Ivy, who was still spitting and kicking. An officer stepped forward, reading from a tablet with a calm, professional demeanor that contrasted sharply with the chaos. Julian Montgomery, you are under arrest for corporate embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, the officer stated, snapping the handcuffs onto my husband's wrists. And you, another officer said, spinning Ivy around. Ivy Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy, accessory to attempted murder, and massive tax fraud regarding the charity account found in your name. Tax fraud? Ivy gasped, her fight suddenly leaving her as the cold metal clicked around her wrists. I do not have a charity account. The bank records say otherwise, the officer replied, tightening the cuffs. As they were dragged toward the exit, Mr. Henderson, the biggest investor in the room, stepped forward. He looked at Julian with cold, dead eyes. Consider our partnership terminated. Julian, Henderson said, his voice carrying across the room. My legal team will be in touch to sue for damages. You are finished in this town. Finished, Julian tried to plead, but he was silenced by a figure emerging from the crowd. His father walked up to him, his face gray with shock but his posture rigid. Julian looked at his father, perhaps hoping for a savior. Dad, please, you have to help me. Julian whimpered, tears streaming down his face. Smack! The sound of the slap was louder than the gunshot of a starting pistol. Julian's head snapped to the side. His father stood there, his hand trembling, tears of shame welling in his eyes. You are no son of mine, the old man whispered, his voice shaking with revulsion. You have disgraced this family name forever. The police began to haul them away. As they passed the stage, I walked down the steps, my red dress flowing around me like a river of blood. I stepped into Ivy's path. She looked up at me, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared, hatred burning in her eyes. I leaned in close, so only she could hear. That green dress suits you perfectly. Ivy, I whispered, a small smile playing on my lips. It is the color of envy, and coincidentally, the color of your new prison uniform. I signaled to the security team at the doors. They threw them open, revealing a sea of flashing lights. I had invited every major news outlet in the city. As Julian and Ivy were dragged out into the night, they were blinded by the camera flashes, their shame immortalized forever on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The applause from the ballroom floor was not the polite, scattered clapping of uncomfortable guests. It was a thunderous, rhythmic ovation. Mr. Henderson was the first to clap, nodding his approval at my ruthless efficiency. And soon the entire room followed suit. They were sharks recognizing a predator in their midst. I had not just exposed a scandal. I had demonstrated the kind of crisis management that shareholders dreamed of. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice steady as the applause died down. I apologize for the interruption to your evening. However, transparency is the cornerstone of my business philosophy. Effective immediately, I am assuming full executive control of the corporation. The rot has been cut out. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and vindication. I sat in Victoria's office, signing the final affidavits for a unilateral divorce. The evidence was so overwhelming that the judge granted an emergency order freezing Julian out of every asset we shared. You will love this, Victoria said, sliding a document across her mahogany desk. Since Julian's personal accounts are frozen pending the embezzlement investigation, he cannot access any funds. He applied for a private attorney, but his credit cards were declined. He is being represented by a court-appointed public defender. I took a sip of my espresso, savoring the bitterness. The man who only wore bespoke Italian suits is being defended by the state. That is poetic. But the true twist, the knife that severed the final thread of Julian's dignity, came from the detention center. Victoria's phone buzzed with an update from the district attorney's office. She listened for a moment, her eyebrows shooting up, before she hung up and looked at me with wide eyes. "You are not going to believe this," she said. "The medical intake at the jail. Ivy is not pregnant." I frowned. "Did she lose the baby due to the stress?" "No, Scarlett," Victoria said, a dark smile forming. "There never was a baby." She confessed during interrogation. She bought a fake positive test online to panic Julian. She knew he was hesitating about committing you to the asylum, so she invented the pregnancy to force his hand. She needed him to move faster so she could get access to the money. I laughed. It was a sharp, sudden sound. Julian had destroyed his entire life, thrown away a loving marriage and a multi-million-dollar career, all for an heir that was nothing more than a plastic prop bought on the internet. He had been played just as hard as I had, perhaps even harder. I wasted no time in purging the physical remnants of their presence. I listed the mansion for sale the very next day. I could not walk through those halls without seeing the ghosts of their deception. When it sold for $12 million to a tech mogul from California, I took a check for $500,000 and donated it to a local shelter for women escaping financial abuse. Then, there was the matter of the ring. The police released the blue diamond ring from evidence after it was processed. I held it in my hand, looking at the stone that had been in my family for 3 generations. It was beautiful, but it felt heavy with betrayal. Julian had defiled it by sliding it onto Ivy's finger. I took it to a custom jeweler in the downtown district. "I want you to melt the setting," I told the craftsman. "Take the diamond out and sell it. I do not want the money. Donate the proceeds to the same shelter." "And the gold?" he asked. Surprised? "Melt it down," I commanded. "Make it into a simple vertical bar pendant and engrave a single word on it. Freedom." My company flourished in the aftermath. I fired every single executive who had aligned themselves with Julian, clearing out the sycophants and the spies. We launched 3 new major projects in the first quarter, and without Julian siphoning off funds, our profit margins soared by 40%. Dr. Eris, realizing he was facing serious prison time for medical malpractice and conspiracy, pled guilty immediately. He was stripped of his license, never to practice medicine again. One morning, I walked past a newsstand on my way to a board meeting. I stopped dead. There, on the cover of Business Weekly, was a photo of me. I was wearing the red dress from the gala, looking fierce and unbreakable. The headline read, "The Iron Heiress, How Scarlett Montgomery Turned a Scandal into an Empire." I bought a copy, adjusted my sunglasses, and walked into my building. I was no longer just a wife or an heiress. I was a force of nature. It took 6 months for the gavel to finally fall, echoing through the packed courtroom like a gunshot signaling the end of a war. I sat in the witness box, wearing a tailored navy suit, my back straight and my hands folded calmly in my lap. I was not there as a grieving wife today. I was the prosecution's star witness and the survivor of a conspiracy that had captivated the entire city. I looked across the aisle at the defense table. Julian looked nothing like the arrogant millionaire who had toasted to his own success at the Sterling Club. The months in county jail had been unkind to him. His hair was thinning and gray, his skin sallow, and his once imposing frame seemed to have collapsed in on itself. When he caught my eye, he did not sneer or glare. He looked at me with a desperate, pathetic pleading, as if silently begging me to undo the destruction he had brought upon himself. Ivy sat 2 chairs away from him, refusing to look in his direction. Throughout the trial, she had tried to paint herself as a naive victim, a young girl groomed by a powerful older man. "Your Honor, I was manipulated," Ivy had sobbed during her testimony, though the tears looked practiced. He told me he would kill me if I did not help him with the accounts. I was terrified, but my lawyer, Victoria, had played the recordings from my car. The jury heard Ivy's voice, clear and cruel, mocking my miscarriage and laughing about stealing my fortune. There was no fear in that recording, only greed. The judge, A stern woman with no patience for theatrics read the verdict: Julian Montgomery, for multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. I sentence you to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Julian put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Ivy Thorne, the judge continued, for your active role in the conspiracy and fraud, you are sentenced to 8 years. Ivy screamed as the bailiffs moved in, a sharp, ugly sound that was cut short as they dragged her out the side door. I watched them go, feeling a strange lightness in my chest, as if a heavy coat had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I walked out of the courthouse and onto the wide stone steps. 6 months ago, on the night I discovered the truth, the sky had been weeping freezing rain. Today, the Boston sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The air was crisp and smelled of spring. Scarlet. I turned to see Dante Ricci waiting near the bottom of the steps. Dante was Julian's old business rival, a man Julian had always despised because Dante played fair and still won. He was also the one who had quietly provided my private investigator with the initial tip about Julian's offshore accounts. Dante, I nodded, adjusting my sunglasses. Thank you for being here. I would not have missed it, Dante said, his voice deep and warm. He hesitated for a moment, shifting his weight. I know it is early, and you have a lot to process, but I would love to take you to dinner tonight. Not to talk about mergers or assets, just dinner, as a man who would like to get to know an incredible woman. I looked at him. He was handsome, kind, and most importantly, honest. A part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to fill the void Julian had left. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew I did not need a filler. Ask me again in a month. Dante, I said, offering him a genuine smile. Right now, I have a date with myself. He smiled back, respectful and patient. I will be counting the days. I walked to my car, a brand new convertible I had bought with my own dividends. Before I started the engine, I pulled an envelope from my purse. Inside was a single piece of paper, the invoice for the private dinner at the Sterling Club. The night the nightmare began, I had paid the balance in full, including the vintage wine they never drank. I wrote a note on the bottom in red ink, paid with your freedom. I handed it to my driver. Make sure this gets to Julian's cell at the state prison. I want it to be the first piece of mail he receives. As I drove onto the highway, the city skyline gleaming in the rearview mirror, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from my bank. The merger of my company with a new international partner had just finalized. The deposit was 8 figures. I laughed, the sound carried away by the wind whipping through my hair. I was 32 years old. I was alone. And as I drove toward the golden horizon of the setting sun, I realized I had never been richer, stronger, or more free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And please comment down below where you are tuning in from so we can connect and share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.